So, good morning, everyone. Very many thanks to the organizers for inviting me to give a virtual keynote for the 9th International Conference on Research and Education, entitled Internationalization and Globalization of Education. So, I'm Maria Tsouroufli. The title of my presentation is Othering and Internationalization of Higher Education. I'm Professor of Education at Brunel University London and also the Director of Research. I have founded and currently lead the Interculturality for Diversity and Global Learning Research Group. I'll strongly encourage you to have a look at our work by following the link here, and also contact me if you'd like to know more about the group and also have any questions that might not be answered in this presentation. So the aim of this talk is to critique very celebratory and romanticized notions of internationalization of higher education, to critically explore the othering of staff and students, international students, staff, or migrant academics, in international spaces of higher education, a particular focus in the UK, although many of the things that I'm going to mention today, the ideas that I'm going to share, might have applicability to other contexts, particularly Anglophone contexts. And also, I'd like to talk a little bit about the inequalities that are perpetuated or exacerbated through neoliberal projects of internationalization. And by neoliberal here, I mean an approach that focuses obviously on free market higher education, aiming to generate income and open up global opportunities. And thirdly, I'd like to cover socially just internationalized education that critically and creatively engages with diversity and difference. Now, just some data about international students from various years. I haven't done a systematic research here. So the largest number of international students are the Chinese students, and I don't think this pattern has changed. In 2017, the number of Chinese students in the UK was over 60,000, with a rate of growth of 11%. Another group, a much smaller group, is that of Black African students, and the particular reason that I'm mentioning them here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them later. 5.4% of undergraduates in the UK were Black Africans. And then a smaller number of EU students. We always had a small number of EU students, and that group is shrinking actually since Brexit, although it's anecdotal evidence. Now, I want to start by saying a little bit about practices and discourses, popular discourses of internationalization. In the UK and certainly in other parts of the world, including Australia, we've seen a rapid expansion of internationalization in the early 90s. In those days, students from outside Europe and staff, but also from within Europe, moved to the UK to study and work. And the popular political discourse, the government discourse, is that, of course, students are good for the economy and the future health of UK and further and higher education. The good, because, of course, they generate income. Now, as far as internationalization approaches or policies are concerned, we've seen universities either taking a symbolic or a more transformative approach. The symbolic, of course, is all about income, generating income, bringing in money, revenue, maybe developing some international partnerships, a study abroad module and that sort of thing. Whereas a transformative internationalization approach goes much further because it's concerned with knowledge sharing, cooperation, and a plan for integrating an international intercultural dimension into the teaching, research, and service functions of academic institutions, which of course is a lot more challenging and difficult to achieve. Now, in the literature, and certainly, there is this very popular discourse of internationalization as neutral, as a disembodied process, whereas in reality, it's very much an embodied and effective practice, and I'll talk more about that. And it's seen as an unconditional good, without any reference, perhaps very little reference to the challenges and the inequalities that it might create. And advanced higher education, which is a higher education body and accreditation body for equality schemes, higher education, also defines internationalization as a transformative and continual process. But as I said, in reality, the reality is very different. So how has the international been constructed, and why I'm using other or othered here? I mean, international refers to any UK-born student now, and obviously before Brexit, there were different definitions of the international of someone outside Europe. But the very dominant idea is that the international is not a home student, it's not one that is complete in the sense that it's someone who comes here to learn, our ways of life, and someone who's missing out in terms of citizenship, symbolic capital or ethnic capital or other, language competence. And all that, despite the fact, of course, that, the international students read, write, and they write doctorates in a language which is not their mother tongue, despite the fact that international migrant staff publish, they're extremely successful, the fact they speak foreign languages, despite the fact that they have international cosmopolitan identities. I mean, that's not seen as carrying symbolic capital. Oops, sorry, moved fast there. And of course, there's very little work around this, the problematization of adjustment and its adjustment, and in the cultural labor that has to be done almost exclusively by the international rather than the home students. So what has actually happened to international students when they come to the UK or to other countries? I mean, they have to constantly reconstruct their identities, including identities of gender and race, and adapt in a globalized world. In my own work, I did with international PhD students. I argued that they're very much in a state of hybridity, all their identities in a state of hybridity, and that they face multiple inequalities while they make attempts to make sense of a predominantly white Western world and to build capital. I mean, even if they study in diverse universities where there's a higher number of international students and diverse staff, I mean, they still have to navigate the nexus of inequalities that they face within a predominantly Western world. So they will face challenges, difficulties. We know very little about how they adjust, and we know that they experience racism, particularly the Chinese students, within the university and outside. However, I mean, there is research that shows that they are satisfied, whatever satisfaction means, because of course satisfaction and adjustment can be received in different ways. But there is a degree of satisfaction they get from the higher education experience. So why othering? Why is it the othering is central to this work? I mean, here I'm going, and I have been very much influenced by Simone de Beauvoir as a feminist, of course, and doing work on gender. I've very often drawn with this notion of otherness, the other being the woman, the other subject, and also I've drawn on more recent work that's been done around othering in the banking sector, and the work that I've done in medicine and medical education about the othering of female professionals. And othering, apologies, sorry. Othering is obviously a process very contingent on the construction of the same. So one is defined as the other for not sharing certain characteristics or having the intellectual potential of the group of the same, and then it's acquired lesser status. So the international, for example, doesn't speak English in the way that he or she should speak English, doesn't behave or operate in the way that a home student should. The process of othering is relevant not only to gender, but other strands of diversity, including race and ethnicity, and all the strands of diversity. So Racism and othering are two intertwined and overlapping processes that we should be looking at when thinking and planning internationalization initiatives. We should be thinking about the legacy of historical operations, such as slavery and colonialism, if we operate within the UK, but certainly other contexts like Australia, Canada, and States. And we should be exploring how has these processes, how have they shaped universities. So racism and othering pervade all aspects of life. And here I'd like to talk briefly about the experiences of Black African international students. Obviously they don't have the kind of, they have a different linguistic capital because English is their first language. It's the language they learn, some of them who come from the ex-British colonies, but they have to navigate another nexus of inequalities, inequalities of race, color, ethnicity, citizenship, within the colonial, the post-colonial imperialistic context of the UK. So Ziolde in his study argues with Black African students that they need to reimagine current unproblematized depiction of international education and foreground race and racism in research about international students and certainly staff, I think. So in his work, the findings were very, very interesting because they challenge this notion of internationalization as a disembodied experience. And instead, internationalization was a very embodied, very affective experience. Black African students felt extremely lonely, in isolation. Nobody would talk to them. Nobody from the home students would make any attempt to have any interaction with them, any relationships. And that, of course, put them in a very difficult position. They couldn't make friendships. They couldn't develop a sense of belonging. They couldn't even build an educational company. So yes, although there are of course benefits to internationalization from internationalization, including developing intercultural competencies. I mean, who really benefits from that's the big question. And also, what are the effective implications of internationalization? What about epistemic exclusion? Exclusions, whose knowledge has legitimacy and currency, whose voices are heard? And I'm referring here to students as well as staff, because we have an increasing number of international staff coming from different parts of the world, not just both within and outside Europe. And you have to face multiple inequalities of migration, race, etc. So really, the university is not just a space where people can progress and develop and experience meritocracy, collegiality, and the free exchange of ideas, but it's basically a space of exclusion and discrimination, as Amidjulu argues. And we need to be thinking about that when we are thinking of internationalization. I mean, international students obviously faced a number of inequalities during the pandemic, and or even existing inequalities were exacerbated during the pandemic. Some of them stayed in the country, the UK rather, under very difficult circumstances, feeling very lonely, far away from their families. Others went back home and they had to attend lectures virtually, of course, in the middle of the night, facing other problems, financial, blah, blah, So, and also Chinese students in the UK faced increased racism and discrimination during COVID and during the lockdown. So, I think it's important to think, as I said, going back to what Amidjulu argued, to think of the university as a space of exclusion rather than a place of exchange of ideas, and not have this romanticized notion of internationalization and of higher education. Because international students are one group they're just one of the groups that experience an excess of inequalities. Black, British-born descendants of post-war Caribbean migrants are also victims of symbolic violence and racism, seen as problematic as learners. Ethnic minority students are feeling as space invaders in higher education. Working class students in elite universities in the UK, strangers in paradise. And of course, Muslim students in higher education, very alienated because they are usually portrayed as incompatible, or perceived as incompatible, particularly the women, with the British way of life. everybody's, and male Muslim students and Asian-looking students, they experience prejudice because, you know, they're always seen as being at risk of radicalization and in need of monitoring and surveillance. So various groups, Black people who are born in the UK, ethnic minority students, Muslim, working class, and drawing here on Archer and Leithwood's work, working class students, I think as individuals that must adapt and change in order to fit in, to participate in higher education. Of course, this applies to international students. And that experience of fitting in is or trying to fit in is very embodied, very emotional, and very difficult. So what's the way forward? What's the way forward? How can we adopt an intersectional approach to equality and difference? We need to think about equality across different strands of diversity, and we need to be thinking of sustaining synergies between equality and internationalization initiatives that break the cycle of non-performativity of anti-racist policies, diversity talk and diversity practices, and we need to engage in a critical pedagogy of whiteness that promotes an expanded notion of race. And we need to be thinking of how we can promote pedagogies of critical citizenship, drawing the experiences and views of both home and others, and creating safe spaces for intercultural dialogue, intersubjectively, and international cosmopolitan. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hope you enjoy the rest of the